The war itself was a challenge for many of us who were at that age. I was 18 when it began, and I did have hopes of going overseas at that point, but fortunately I was sent here to Australia and to Lake Boga to have a period of preparation and training for the work that had to be done up north. The Catalinas were the one aircraft that went through the whole of World War II. One of them was shot down before Pearl Harbor. The week before Pearl Harbor, a Catalina was shot down up in the north of beyond Australia, and right through to the very end of the war there were 322 men who didn't ever return to their families. We're trying to have that problem sorted out, and the War Memorial has indicated that they will set aside a week in 2019 leading to the date of the 15th of December, because the work that was done by Catalinas was very important indeed. When General MacArthur was asked what he thought about the war and who had made a contribution, he said there were three things that won the war. There was first of all the Jeep, of course, which was the universal way of getting people transferred from one place to the other. The DC-2, which was a cargo plane that carried material and soldiers and so on from one place. And the third one, the Catalina. Because of the success of the Catalina's mining campaign, this was a really significant statement that he made. The Japanese were entirely dependent upon their ships to bring their soldiers and their food and their oil and everything. It was an island war. It was very different from the wars in Europe, where it was all part of a continent. And the minute you have control over the sea and who can come and where they can come, that was why the Catalinas were so important. Particularly so after the middle of 1943, April 43, when we were set on deep sea mining. The deep sea mining was to have these large mines, 1,000 pounds each, hung under the wings. We'd already taken everything that was weighty out of the plane so that we had more range to go to a far off place. That these mines were then used to seal off all of the harbours in the island war. So it meant that there came the point in 44 when the Japanese just weren't able to get the food and the soldiers and so on that they needed, because of the effectiveness of the Catalinas using these 1,000 pound mines. We would go into a harbour and at about 200 feet drop these mines in very clearly specified places. We recorded them exactly so that when it was necessary for them to be brought up again after the period of the threat has finished, we knew exactly where they were. But it was a pretty dangerous activity, and one of my best friends was blown up over Balikpapan Harbour, a harbour where the oil supplies were very, very pure indeed, had very little need of further refinement. This friend of mine, Frank Robinson, was killed because we had no intelligence at all about what was in the various harbours where we were going. One of the weaknesses was we should have had some kind of information giving us a sense of what kind of opposition there would be. Well, on this night there just was not that kind of information, and he was the second plane to come in low over a large Japanese warship that blew him out of the sky. So the war was important. A lot of people in the early part of the war said, well, the really important war is the one in Europe. But fortunately, people like our Prime Minister, whose name was Curtin, and Another very remarkable man, a man by the name of Commander King, was in charge of the American Navy. He spoke to the three leaders who had been, as it were, running the war over in the European area. King said, "We cannot abandon our brothers and sisters who are in the Pacific. They are all from our homes in the original state, but we must stand by and keep them as our first priority." And because of King and people like our Prime Minister at that time, Curtin, the whole of the War of the Pacific was carried through. The Japanese, of course, were hoping to be able to get raw materials from the islands where they had conquered the local people, and they felt that they were able to have their own supplies if that went on into the future. But from my point of view, many of us think that the mining campaigns of the Catalinas were a very effective way of preventing them getting those supplies, which meant that they were not able to carry on. And that's of course what General MacArthur said at the very end, that these were the three things that saved Australia.